everyone. Welcome to another episode of Therapy, Etc. I have a guest here today, Miss Nallely Arteaga, and so I'm very excited to have her. So, Nallely, if you could share a little bit about yourself and your background, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me. I don't know. I always never know how to introduce myself. I'm an LA native. I should probably start with that.
Yeah, there you go.
Li- Living in the IE now, but I'm an assistant professor at Cal State Dominguez Hills.
Hmm.
So that's exactly why I always say I'm an LA native, because to make that connection with people on campus.
Uh-huh.
And I work in the College of Education, the teacher education department. I work mostly with students that are interested in a career in teaching or in schools.
Okay.
And I'm a former high school teacher. ¿Qué más?
And
Yeah.
you recently received your PhD. Let's not forget that the biggest news.
Yeah, so that was 2020. I finished my PhD after 6 long years,
Mhm.
and I got that from UC Riverside.
Congrats,
So
Mujer. That's
I'm a
awesome.
pandemic, what are they calling it? Pandemic PhDs. So
Probably
yeah.
the hardest because you didn't you just had to be isolating and probably really hard to connect with other people.
It worked out, I think, perfectly because I needed to finish, and I feel that the pandemic kind of forced me to get it done. I had
Mhm,
nowhere to go. I was
mhm,
at home, my computer, my hands, my
mhm.
books, and that's all I had. So yeah, it helped me finish it. And I
Yeah.
had to finish it. I was in a really tight deadline because I got hired before I finished. So
Oh,
yeah, so in the agreement, in the contract, they wanted me to be done. Was it September? August? No, August. Yeah, before the semester starts. They wanted me to be done with my degree in August. So when they ask you in an interview, like, so do you think you're gonna be done with your degree by, and you always, yes,
absolutely.
I will. And honestly, I was nowhere near done. So then I got the job, which I wasn't expecting to get it. So then I was forced to finish, like, either you finish or you're about to lose like the biggest opportunity of your life. So
Wow. And I hear that these jobs are really competitive.
yes. So, I mean, PhD programs are competitive, I think by nature, like even to get accepted,
Mhm.
um, they're really competitive. But then to finish a PhD, right? Like I always tell people, like, if you're ever looking into doctoral programs, always look to see how many students are actually graduating. And then you'll notice that they don't always have graduating students every year because it's really hard to finish.
Wow.
And on top of that, you might, even if you graduate, finding a job is a tenure track job, or depending on what you want to do, right? But most PhDs either want to do research at a university, or they want to go back and work for the school board districts or something like that. But for the majority, I would say that are looking for a tenure track job at a university.
Mm.
And so those are really competitive, and you have to apply like a year in advance, and it's really competitive. But
Well, good for you, Mujer. I'm so happy for you. Congrats on all the
yeah,
super huge achievements.
yeah, that was, thank you. Yeah. So I feel like I never got to celebrate the way I
I
would
know. I'm
have.
still waiting for la fiesta.
No. I didn't even want to participate in graduation. Like this year, you know how the class of 2020 was able to walk. I didn't even want to do that. Like I was so, I don't know, just like meh. I felt
Mm.
annoyed because I wish I would have done it 2020, and I feel like that was taken from me, and I just didn't want to do it a year later.
Yeah, a few
But
people share that same sentiment. Just a lot
yeah,
of things like missed opportunities, and even though you can make it up again or do it again, it's just not the same.
yeah. I did end up taking like pictures for my parents. I surprised them
Hmm.
because that was also their thing for them, right? Like you're graduating, you're the one getting the degree, but your parents, they have been waiting for this moment, right? And to see their excitement during my defense and all of that, like I think their biggest dream was to get to see me walk on stage wearing the cap and gown. And so
Right.
when I knew that wasn't going to happen, I actually borrowed one from a colleague,
Hmm.
and I hired a photographer, and it's like, I need to make like this really cool photo shoot for my parents.
That's so awesome that you got to do that, though. I mean, I'm sure that was super special for them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I feel like they liked it.
So I'm curious to know, like, I know that you worked in a high school, but you worked specifically what? I'm not quite sure, but I know that you did work in a continuation, right?
Mhm.
Was that the
Yeah.
whole experience, or did you work at a regular high school as well?
So I actually started out at a middle school. It was a middle school and a high school. And then from there, I did that for 1 year. And then I got pink slipped, which is what
Mm.
happens when schools have to work through their financial budgets. And so usually they have to let go of the first uh, teachers that, or the last teachers that got hired. So it was like myself and my neighbor, my math teacher that was next to me. And so we got pink slipped, and then, but they always tell you like, don't worry, in a couple of weeks, you'll probably hear from the district again with your job back. Like, we just need to figure out our finances. And sure enough, like 3 weeks later, I get a call from HR, and they're like, oh, we have a job for you, but it's not at the middle school that you were at. And I was like, great. And she was like, it's at a high school. I'm like, perfect. Like, I wanted to teach high school. She was like, no, 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 it's a continuation high school. And I don't know about you, but I had never heard of continuation schools. Like, I didn't even know that they were a thing or that they existed.
Yeah, I heard about it. Yeah, I knew about some people that went to continuation when I was in high school, so I knew a little bit about it.
Yeah, and then but mostly because, we're tracked, we're probably in AP courses, honors courses, so like
Hmm.
we never, you never hear of those kinds of options. But yeah, so that I didn't know. I learned as I accepted the job what they were. But right away I knew that the lady at HR, she was like, you shouldn't take that job. Like, you should just go work for another district. Like, those schools are not for you. Like, you look really young. Like, I don't think that's gonna be a fit for you. And I was like, why? Like, why is she telling me this?
Uh-huh.
But then I learned that continuation schools have like this really bad stigma, really negative stereotypes of being schools that are like considered dumping grounds for
Oh.
like problematic youth that are not successful in traditional school settings. So, and so a lot of like the stereotypes that you hear is like, oh, they serve the girls that get pregnant and get kicked out of school. They serve the students that fight, the students in gangs, the drug dealers,
Mhm.
and so it's not that. I mean, sure, it happens, but it's not that's not why they're there, right? They're there to kind of help students recover their credits. So students that were not on track to graduating, they go to continuation schools and they're able to pick up their credits a lot faster because they have different programs, different schedules to kind of help them get there. But yeah, I mean, you're also working with youth that have been recently like let go of like juvie camps and different facilities and centers, and so traditional schools don't want them there. So then they'll tell them like, you know what, go enroll at the continuation school. So
Wow.
yeah, I worked there for about 5 years.
Oh, wow. When they told you it wasn't going to be a good fit.
Yeah, yeah, and don't yeah. I mean, it was definitely my most challenging teaching experience
Hmm.
so far. I probably went home crying like 3 out of the 5 days. I never
Wow.
cried on campus, but in my car, as soon as I would get into my car, I was like,
What were some of the hardest things that you were witnessing or going through?
you know, so the district where I was working at, it's a district that is serves like a fairly mixed population of students in terms of like their racial demographic.
Mhm.
And so, and I knew that because I taught at a middle school, right? And so in that same district. But then at the continuation level, it was all majority Black and Latinx students, mostly male students.
Mhm.
And so I was like, what is going on? Like, why are they ending up here? Right. So I was noticing that. And then, I mean, there's so many things that I don't think anyone gets trained as a teacher to deal with. I mean, there was issues of like, there was drug dealing, a lot of drug use in class. That was
Mhm.
probably the hardest thing, like learning how to like, if you see a student doing something, like what do you do, right? Prostitution.
Right.
I mean, like really heavy stuff that
Wow. I didn't expect those parts in a continuation.
no guns. Like I remember seeing there was a fight once, and then a gun just flew out of the student's like pocket. I think he had it in his jean or something.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it's like you're in the middle of all that. Like, how do you respond to that, right? So yeah, it's kind of like you learn as you go.
So now you are a college professor and it's a different kind of tough because
Hmm.
you shared with me this email that I'm like in awe, and you're telling me, you told me earlier that it's not the first time.
Yeah, people
Go
always
ahead.
ask me like, "Oh, what do you prefer teaching? Do you prefer teaching high school or do you prefer teaching college?"
Mhm.
And you know, or like what's harder, right? High school or college? And it's
Mhm.
like, well, they're both they both have different challenges. Now the challenges are different because now you're working with adults many
Yeah.
times. And then I mostly teach in the graduate programs. When I taught at UCR, I taught in their graduate program. And so now I'm also in a graduate program, but I also teach some courses for undergrads. And
Mhm.
so because you're working with adults, sometimes they're a lot older than I am. And so there's a lot of like power dynamics in the classroom. And you know, you're working with, depending on where you're at, right? You're working with a lot of students that, you know, come from money, they come from wealth, they feel entitled, they feel privileged. They want to they treat you as if you're there to serve them, like literally like a servant, like give me what I want or I'll get
Wow.
you fired. And
Well,
so
this is what this email said. It said, "Fire her. I want her fired."
yeah.
I was
um,
when I was reading it, I was in complete shock. Like I was literally like with my mouth open, like I cannot believe that somebody would send a professor that email. So just for those listening, the email was basically they weren't happy with maybe the approach or style of the class, and they were literally saying she's the worst professor ever, fire her, like just being really inappropriate, a lot of like profanity in the email. And I just can't ever imagine emailing a professor and telling them that. Like it doesn't
well,
even cross my mind to ever do something like that. And I was so shocked.
well, the thing is that that's just through email. Like they actually do this in person. Like that's even worse because it's like, all right, I don't feel safe right now. Like I don't know if you're about to attack me or but and I've had similar instances. But so I teach mostly in so I teach in the teacher education program. And so one of the core classes that they have to take, and I would say this is true of every credentialing program in the state, maybe and across the nation, I'm not sure. But here in California, they all have to take this required course that's every school calls it different, but it's like a diversity class
Mhm.
where you're supposed to talk about race, gender, class, you know, issues of immigration and social status and ¿qué más? Generations and so like different aspects of a person's identity and how all of that intersects.
Mhm.
Because you're going to be working with, you know, different types of students, different, you know, and so
Mhm.
we want to make sure that those teachers are able to address those needs. And so it's a required class. And so a lot of times it's faculty of color that get hired to teach those classes because
Mhm.
either you have the expertise, you have the knowledge, or because, you know, the older white tenured faculty, they don't want to teach that class. Like they want to teach whatever they want. They let or they want faculty of color to teach those courses. And
Mhm.
so I knew that when I got hired that they were going to want me to teach that. Um, and so because it's a required class, that means that not everybody wants to be there. Not everybody wants to talk about race. They don't want to talk about class. They don't, you know?
Uh-huh.
And so for a lot of students of color, this is nothing new. Like they know about it because they lived it, they experienced it, know about the inequities, inequality in schools.
And
They
they
know
think they're
who's privileged.
relating to the material.
Yeah. So on the one end, I have my students of color who are like, yes, like that's exactly how it was like for me to go in school in the hood, or that's exactly what happened to me, you know? And then there's the white folks who didn't go to schools like that, and they're like, that's not true. That's not what it's like. That's not what schools are like, right? And
Wow.
so in a lot of these courses, and this is not something I say, this is literally what's in the literature, what research says is that a lot of times white students feel attacked in this class. Like, even though you're not saying, you, Patty, you are privileged because you didn't, you know, whatever. They feel like you're talking to them, like you're talking about them. And so their response, like for a lot of them, it's to shut down and not to want to participate in class. They'll stay quiet. And then there's those students that, and this is exactly what they mean by white rage, right? Like they get angry, like they get so offended. And and they want you fired. They don't want you to talk about race and in school,
Wow.
you know? And so,
Nayeli, how do you respond to this? Like, if somebody's approaching you in class or sending you an email, like, what is your response in these situations?
I feel like I'm still learning. Um, and because not everybody experiences this, right? Like, I can't just go to like my tenured faculty for advice because they're gonna look at me like, well, I've never gotten emails like that. I've never had students do that.
And then it may
Yeah.
seem like it's about you specifically versus look at the
Mhm,
topic that I'm teaching
mhm.
versus what you're teaching.
Right. If you're teaching math or
Like it is
statistics,
what it is.
it is what it is. No one's gonna have
Uh,
a problem with that, right?
uh-huh.
But if you're talking about Black Lives Matters in schools, then someone's gonna feel like, oh, you're saying this about me. I think what I've been doing is just going to like other faculty of color, other women of color, and then
Mhm.
the sad part is that they say the same thing. Like, look at my evals, look at what they're saying about my classes. And it's really sad, because there aren't any like protocols. I feel like everyone's just trying to wing it, like trying to figure out how to respond to that. Because one, if it's unsafe, I'm not going to respond to it, right? I'm gonna let you calm down if it's in person. But if it's through email, well, then you just gave me evidence that I can forward to the dean.
Mhm.
And so there's been incidents where students they face like serious like disciplinary um, issues, like either they've gotten kicked out of the program or whatnot. But it's a lot of more work on my end, right? Like it's a lot more labor that goes
Mhm.
into like, now I have to fight this. Now I gotta show this to the dean. Now the dean wants to talk to me. Now they want to take me to another department. They want to know what's going on. And so the higher you go up in the ladder, the more white people that you're going to be talking to. And so for a lot of them, this is all also new to them. But I think I've been very fortunate in that every dean that I've been sent to go talk to, they already knew what I was talking about. I'm like, look, I'm
Oh.
teaching these classes. And so, white students are not always as accepting of the topics. And they're like, oh, we know. Sorry, you had to go through this. Like, we already know. And so,
Wow.
either having other faculty of color, like, just help me, like, they're mentoring me, they're guiding me, but usually this is at the hands of administration, right? Like it shouldn't come down to me to try and fix this. This is not a Nayeli problem. This is an institutional problem. This is a systemic problem. We see this happening across teacher ed programs, and not just teacher ed programs, but like even other graduate programs where we see them teaching CRT, critical race theory. Like we're
Mhm.
seeing a lot of students who want to assert their privilege, and they'll want you to they'll demand you to change the syllabus, to change the topics,
It's so unheard of for me because I feel like when I was in graduate school, it was like, this is what I'm learning. That's it. But I guess because in my upbringing, it was very much like you kind of do what you're told. And that was, or like the teacher, or like is the authority figure, the, the principal is the authority figure. These people are in a place of authority. So I never was like questioning. And I mean, good and bad, I guess, right? But in
Yeah.
a situation like this, I can't imagine emailing a professor and telling them, can you change the syllabus?
No, and the thing is that I mean, I always tell students like you should question like what's being taught. Like, if there's a problem, you should bring it up, to your professor and not play into like the respectability or like the power dynamics. Like, yeah, if there's something that you don't like you should be able to have those
Mhm.
kinds of conversations with your professors and your teachers and educators. But I think the difference is when they want you to change topics because they're uncomfortable because they feel targeted.
Mhm.
um that same student that emailed me that early in the semester, last semester, she told me she was very uncomfortable in my class, that she hated my class because she didn't like that it was coming from a Latina perspective. And
Oh,
so
okay.
and so it's like, what do you want me to do? Like, what do you want me to get another professor to come teach the class? Like, do you mean a white professor? Are you comfortable with white professors? Is that what you're trying to say?
Wow.
And so, like, I don't know. I mean, how would you respond to that? Like, someone tells you they're not comfortable with you because you're Latina. Like,
Yeah, I have no idea.
it's hard. And so that conversation, like, I always just try and stay calm. Like, I'm still getting paid. I'm not gonna do what I would probably want to say. What I really wanted to say was drop the class. Like, you don't have to take the class. Like,
Bye. Girl,
bye,
girl bye.
girl, bye. But I don't, I'm not tenured yet. So I have to wait. I think those are the kinds of things I could say once I get tenure.
Mhm.
But for now, all I remember just asking her questions like, "Oh, have you never had a Latina professor?" She's like, "No, no, 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 I'm not. Don't call me racist. Don't call me racist." I'm like, "I didn't call you racist." Yeah, but I know where you're going with this. Like, it's just that you just want to talk about Latinos in schools, and like that's not true. Like what you're saying is not true. And I'm like, actually, we're not just talking about Latinos, and we're talking about different populations of students.
But
Um,
also living in LA, it's inevitable to bring it up when we are the majority.
who are you going to teach? If you want to
Yeah.
teach in LA, in LAUSD, you're going to teach predominantly Black and Latinx youth. Like,
Mhm.
and you want to be a teacher in this context, but you're not comfortable having a Latina professor,
Right.
then I might just have to make a recommendation that maybe you're not fit, you're not ready to be a teacher, um, given the context of our schools.
And especially with a school like CSU Dominguez Hills, I feel like it's very diverse. It's in a community in Carson, right?
It's in
Where
Carson.
it's a lot of like black and brown, primarily brown, right? People
Yes.
that live there. So it's interesting that they're going to that school, and yet this is a perspective that they're coming.
The reason why I wanted to work at DH is because they are the most diverse Cal State. And I know I already knew because of my experience at UCR, where it's predominantly, well, undergraduate programs are predominantly either at Dominguez Hills or even UC Riverside. They're predominantly like students of color,
Mhm.
but graduate programs, and that's where the data looks a little bit different, right?
Right, right,
It
right.
doesn't serve predominantly students of color. So in graduate programs, that's where you see more majority white students, and then depending on the department, right? But the teaching force is about 80% white across the nation. So obviously there's a huge disparity there, right, between who the teachers are and who the students are. And so there's always been a push towards getting more teachers of color in the field. But and Dominguez Hills, thankfully has more students of color, but definitely not at the same level as undergraduate programs. But yeah, I think I did make that same observation. I'm like, interesting that even in a program that has more students of color, my attention, my focus, my time has to be spent trying to attend to the needs of that one white or two students who are pissed, who are angry, who are crying, Patty. Like they feel like I just put them on blast or something. Like it's crazy to experience. It's probably the least enjoyable part of my my job is having to do that because I'm still learning
I
to
hope that you can
work with
that
that.
I hope that in these experiences that they are able to be like, okay, I get it. I hope that they can have a little bit of insight, that they can look into themselves and be like, okay, maybe I need to learn about this more, or work on this or something.
And then there are some occasions where there'll be like where there will be students who say, "Oh, this is the first time, we talk about immigrant youth in schools and the inequities that they face."
Mhm.
And so there's that. But then there's those that are like, I don't want to talk about it. Why are we talking about this? I'm so uncomfortable. Like, let's talk about something pretty and nice. And it's like, no.
That's not how it is. That's not how the world works.
Exactly.
Especially with everything surrounding Black Lives Matter and like
Yeah.
the Asian hate that was happening.
Yes.
Just
Yes.
in the most recent, there's so many more, but just in the most recent, the past year or
Yeah.
whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, so Nayeli, how do you take care of yourself when all of this is happening? When you are getting these emails and then the dean is saying, "Yep, sorry," but also, "Yeah, that's how it is." How do you take care of you? Because you still got to see the student in class. You might even see them in other classes. How
Yeah.
do you take care of
Um,
yourself?
I, so one of the things I was doing was just not reading, because we get student evals at the end of the semester, right? And so I just didn't even want to read those because I already knew that even though 90% of them were going to be, she's amazing, she's great, she's the best professor, da 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 da, da, there's going to be that one that's just like, F you, F this, I hate her, fire her. And so all it all it takes is that one message to kind of ruin, for me at least, to kind of ruin the other pretty messages that I received. And so
Right,
I
right,
was
right,
starting to just like not read those. But I don't think that's the right approach, right? Because I have to read them to kind of improve my practice.
right.
But that was working for a while.
And so you
Uh,
had to like, or maybe even opening them when you're ready, like when you're emotionally, mentally, like in the space to do it.
yeah, I also have like a happy file next
Mhm.
to my inbox. And I put all the, sometimes like you get those emails from students that are like, oh, I wanted to share a picture of me in the classroom. Thank you for helping me be the teacher that I always dreamed of. And so I'll keep those saved. And when I'm getting these hateful emails, like I'll open these and kind of remind myself of my purpose, the reason why I'm in this field. Um, and I have a lot of pictures too of like me teaching at the continuation level.
Mhm.
Those always bring me joy. And I always say that the reason why I pursued a PhD was because I wanted to provide answers or responses to what was happening to them. Kind of helped me remind myself like why I'm in this. But other than that, what else do I do to
I
take
know you
care of my?
love dessert.
I love dessert. That's really not a healthy way. Um, no, just like plugging out. I think just
Mhm.
plugging out, watching TV,
Yeah, just
watching
trying to
it.
get your mind off of things.
Yeah.
So how many classes are you teaching right now? The semester just started, right?
Yeah, I just started. We teach the first 2 years, you teach 3 classes. And
Okay.
then after that, you have to teach four. So Cal States are a teaching university, so you get a heavier teaching load versus a research university where you have to do more research and less teaching.
So overall, would you say that you enjoy teaching at the college level more or at continuation or high school students?
Well, I think that what I miss now is obviously we're working through Zoom, so it's not like I get to interact that much with students the way that I was able to in person. But, I think at the continuation level, as hard as it was, the kind of love you get from your students is just, unimaginable.
Mhm.
I mean, if they don't like you, they're not gonna like you, but if they love you. Like I remember getting like pastelitos from like quinceañeras, like they went on a Saturday and by Monday they're like, oh look, miss, le traigo pastel. And it's like, oh, I'm not gonna eat that, but thank you so
Thanks.
much. Or, just things like that. And at the college level, I think it's a little bit different, right?
Mhm.
But hopefully once we go back, and then I also haven't had a chance to, in this new role that I'm in, I haven't had a chance to work in person. Everything has been through Zoom. So
Oh, that's right. Because you started, when did you start? Last year?
2020. So
Uh-huh.
I still haven't seen my office. I haven't. I've only met my colleagues through Zoom.
Wow.
So yeah, this is already my second year, so I still feel pretty new.
Uh-huh.
But hopefully, like once I'm in person, it'll start to feel more like
Mhm. I love when you mention about like your students in like high school level, because I remember like in high school hanging out in my teacher's class, just
yeah,
chilling there, just like
yeah,
she's eating lunch, I'm just like hanging out, and
yeah,
those are like really good memories that
yeah,
I had. Like a lot of um, a lot of influence to go to college came from my high school teachers,
yes,
motivating me to get into certain take certain classes or do certain activities. So it sounds
yeah,
like you were also motivating those students in within the high school level as well.
yeah. Like I think that I for sure miss like my lunch being shared with students, even though
Mhm.
teachers get like 20 minutes to eat and go to the restroom and do what they gotta do, and while we're attending to the students are there. Um, but you miss it. You end up
Yeah.
missing like the after school time. They used to come
Hmm.
hang out. And in college, like students, especially at Dominguez Hills, they're working, the working class students, they have jobs, they have families. They don't get to just chill after class. Sometimes
Hmm.
like 5-10 minutes, but for the most part, they're on the go. They gotta keep going. They're trying to take their classes, they're trying to take care of their own kids, they have jobs. So it's a lot harder to kind of make those same connections. And then you don't see them every day the way that you see your high school
High
students,
school
right?
students. Oh, that's right. Maybe just once a week or twice a week or something like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, Nayeli, I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing your story, just of kind of how you started and where you are now, and it's I'm so glad that as a Latina you are in this space, because it's not very common. All of my professors, and you can probably relate to this, the majority were probably white professors, and really trying to relate, but it's so different when you have like a somebody that you can really truly relate to and share some of those similar experiences. So I'm really glad that you are representing out there
Oh,
for
thank
our
you.
Latinx community.
Thank you for having me and, just doing my part.
I love it. Well, thank you everybody for listening. If you have any questions for Nayeli, then please reach out and I can connect the two of you. But Nayeli, I want to thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure talking to you and having this conversation.
Thank you, likewise.
All right, everybody, take good care. Bye.